Today, we're welcoming Becc Holland, again, fresh off her Flip the Script tour and the New York City Marathon, as well as several months ago, her very spicy anti-personal brand masterclass here with us at Saleshacker. That was phenomenal. Today, Becc is here to share another hot take with us, which is against pain points.
Hi, everyone on the line who I haven't met. My name's Becc. I'm a sales trainer. So what that means is that I'm a bit of an expert at, well, nothing really. Point being, I wanted to dive into today to really two different concepts, two really meaty concepts and two stories, if y'all are okay with it. If you give me a thumbs up in the chat. But I'd like to make this as interactive as possible. So if you could keep the chat active. I want to know, I saw a bunch of people tuning in of where you're tuning in from. If everyone wouldn't mind jumping into the chat and just giving me your name, your role, and what company you're working with, that would give me a really good background. But something that you want covered today. So if you put any questions, I'm almost going to KPI people on the best question in the chat, send you a Starbucks gift card. But I will try to get to all questions that I can within the chat today. But I'm going to go ahead and dive in here. So like Kendra mentioned, the lovely Kendra mentioned, I just got fresh off of somehow finishing the New York Marathon after a tour. And so actually my stories for some reason revolve around that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let me know if you can see my screen. Does everyone see it?
It looks great.
Thumbs up. You're like, looks awesome. So point being, I want to go into two different concepts today, really around the different types of selling, but I want to start with one of the stories. So one of the stories that I wanted to lead with is for years and years and years, I had the iPhone 8. So who in here, if you could jump in the chat, has an iPhone 8 versus an iPhone 14. If you have one of those, if you can jump in the chat and let me know, what your reaction to the new iPhone is. But essentially, I had the iPhone 8 for years and years and years, and here it is. It's a absolute monster, and I did not buy a new one. So until very, very recently. So I want to see if anyone can guess why I didn't buy a new one, even knowing that it's, basically archaic. I don't know if I can see the chat at this point.
People are saying didn't need one, not enough perceived value.
Yes.
Don't fix it.
Yes, exactly. If it's not broke, then don't fix it. So y'all really nailed it. So I had the iPhone 8 for years and years. And even though I had a pain point, my pain point was that I would lose charge really, really quickly. I did not essentially do anything about it because to y'all's brilliant point, I did not have a problem. I had a pain point, but I did not have a problem that I wanted to do something about because I would take remote chargers with me when I ran, it was working just fine. But when it came to, I registered for the New York City Marathon, and this is my first real marathon, I'd say, back in July. And that caused me to actually, in September, go ahead and make the plunge and buy the iPhone 14. So I want to see if anyone can guess why I decided to finally, take the plunge and buy the iPhone 14. If you jump in the chat. And why would a marathon make me want to do that? I cannot bring up this chat. I don't know if this is me.
I'm hearing app, longer battery life for music, running KPIs. It's lighter.
Yeah.
Music. Yeah.
Keep going.
Measure the heart rate, health apps, camera, the extra charge.
Yes, essentially. So someone nailed it in there. Is the reason that I went ahead and I went and bought the new iPhone 14 in September is because of music. So for the longest time, I had the pain point of, I would lose charge, but I could solve for it. But it did not become a problem, meaning something I would do something about until the impact of not solving for it became high enough. So when the marathon, came into deck, I thought, if I lose music in the middle of a 45-minute run, not a big deal. If I lose music in the middle of, the New York City, any marathon, but certainly the New York Marathon, then all of a sudden I wouldn't have Taylor Swift on my side, and I might lose my mind a little bit. I might quit and go off the track. So I decided to go ahead and buy the iPhone. And the point behind that is there's a difference between a pain and a problem. So I'm going to send this deck out afterwards, but essentially there's 5 different types of selling, that we have been subject to in history. The first is product. I'm going to be really fast here. This is essentially orienting yourself around, the product that you sell whenever you're describing it. There's feature-centric selling, which is you describing the features. And there's benefit-centric selling, which is you describing general upsides of using the product. So all 3 of these, I want you to think of it like a patient walks into the doctor's office and the doctor asks essentially 0 questions and then starts describing the different medications that they have, in relation to what they think this person would like, hoping that the person would buy it. So product-centric, feature-centric, and benefit-centric, all going to be oriented around that. The difference between product-centric and feature-centric and benefit-centric is benefit-centric is going to be general upsides of using the product. So save time, save money, more time, more money, whereas product is just going to be a description. We then have pain-centric selling, which is selling just according to the pain that people have. So in this instance, it would be, hey, Becc, do you lose charge, really quickly on your iPhone? And the answer to that question is yes, I did lose charge really, really quickly. But I did not do something about it until the impact became high enough. So the last type that we're going to go into really deeply today is problem-centric selling and the differences between that and pain. So to me, the pain-centric selling is going to be the most egregious type of selling or the most dangerous type of selling that we're all kind of trained on to date, because we're going to be outbounding just to get the person to talk about the pain that they already know exists to hopefully get them or convince them to want to buy a product. And the reality is that pain by definition is going to be something that someone already knows about. I already knew that my phone was losing charge. I already knew, how that was impacting me in the present, but I didn't do something about it until a trigger event happened. So I want to go into the difference between pain and problem and kind of the intrinsically, where those 2 are going to divulge in terms of their definition. So a pain is going to be anything that's negative in the present. It's unpleasant, it's uncomfortable, it's some kind of suffering that you're currently incurring. And there's pain in everything that we do. There's pain. Sometimes it's a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 1. Sometimes scale of 1 to 10, it's a 9. Sometimes it's really, really egregious and it's deafening. Sometimes it's just annoying. But a pain is going to be anything negative in the current state, in the present that someone is experiencing. A problem, however, is going to be something that someone has decided to do something about, a set of conditions that they want to change. So the problem with those 2 definitions, or the impact of those 2 definitions on the sales industry, is not all pains are problems, and not all problems are painful yet. So not all pains is someone going to make a move to do something about, and not all things that we're doing something about are painful in the present quite yet. So from my perspective, this is kind of a good, rendition of why the outbound industry is broken. So most people that I see, most of the templates that I see is people outbounding someone, sending someone a message around pain only. And the reality is, if a pain is big enough, typically, I want y'all to jump in the chat, even though I can't even see anything. I almost want people to jump in the Q&A because I can't see anything in the chat. If y'all wouldn't mind, like going over to the Q&A, maybe I can bring it up there. Is anyone in here an athlete, like a really serious athlete, played, any kind of sport growing up or aggressively whenever they were raised? Let's see if you could go into oddly enough the Q&A, or Kendra, if you could let me know if they're in the chat. Mountain bike, okay. Ed, I'm going to pick on you since you came in here. What sport did you play, Ed? Let's see what he's got. What was the main sport that you played?
We're getting a few others in the main chat: volleyball and 5 times All-American track and field.
Okay, so Ed, you played tennis. Looks like. Did you ever have a major injury when you were playing tennis? Any kind of thing during the entire course that you were playing tennis? So do you have a major injury, and if so, what was the major injury? So most people have run into an injury, if they've played any sport aggressively. Kendra, have you played any sports?
I did martial arts as a teen, actually. Yeah.
Okay, so did you have any major injury as you were growing up, or when you were?
Yeah. I twisted my shoulder out of joint pretty painfully.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you twisted your shoulder out of joint, what did you do about it?
I tried to walk it off because I was a teenager.
Okay. And then what did you do about it?
And then what I did about it, then I regretted it as an adult. I'm probably not the right person to ask this question.
So after you realized you couldn't walk it off, how did you handle it after that?
Yeah, no, I mean, like as an adult, I've been doing physical therapy for it. But yeah, as a teen, I just kind of,
yeah,
hunkered. Yeah.
So essentially within outbound, usually if we have something that's going to hurt enough in the present, to Kendra's kind of point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, in the SaaS industry, what people would coin as doing something about it is they would have inbounded. It would have requested a demo, requested to talk to you about your services because they want to do something about the current pain in the present. If they don't have an injury that's big enough, usually if it's a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 1, it's just an annoying pain, then typically people are just, to Kendra's point, going to try and walk it off. They're going to try and keep going because even though there's pain, they're going to try and work through it unless it's egregious enough. So the problem with what this slide represents is when we're outbounding, if we're asking people if they have pain, they're like, yeah, I have pain. On scale of 1 to 10, it's a 1. We're like, describe that pain. And we're like, okay, well, I hurt my arm or I hurt my ankle, and it's been around for the last couple of weeks or so. But they have self-elected that it's not big enough to do something about yet. So the average response rates that I've seen for outbound templates is going to be around 0.5% reply rates, not even positive reply rates or booked meetings. And the average open rate that I've seen is going to be around 15 to 25%. And if I had to guess why, it's because we're reaching out to people about things that they already know about, hoping that we can convince them to do something about it. Where you really can win rapport is by bringing up things and knowing things about your buyer that they don't know. So people are only a pain is only going to turn into a problem, meaning I'm only going to do something about the pain in one of two conditions. Either number one, the pain is egregious enough in the present. So let's imagine with this iPhone 8 that instead of losing charge within 2 to 3 hours, it took 5 minutes. Then the pain would have been egregious enough in the present. And I would have said, okay, this thing is shot. I need to get a new phone. So that's case number one, where a pain is going to turn into a problem, meaning I'm going to do something about it. And then the second case scenario that a pain will become a problem, meaning they'll do something about it, is there's an impact that's high enough if they don't. So what changed for me was not that the pain of losing charge became more egregious. What changed for me is the impact of not solving for it became so high that I decided to get to know, a different phone and buy the iPhone 14, because the impact, of not buying the phone essentially went from I'm going to lose charge in the middle of a 45-minute run to I'm going to lose it in the middle of a marathon and not be able to complete it. So pain is only going to become a problem if the pain is egregious enough in the present, or the impact of not solving for it is high enough so that I'm going to make a move. And the point behind this is, there is an opportunity cost to buying any product. And it's not only the money. The opportunity cost is you have to get to know a whole new system, a whole new thing, a whole new set of conditions, a whole new integration process, number one. And number two, you're not positive that it's actually going to work. So if I buy a tool, a service, etc., trying to solve for a problem and it doesn't work, not only did I lose the money, not only did I have to get to know something different, but I'm going to lose internal political capital, because all of a sudden what I thought would solve for something wasn't effective. So a leader, especially, I know we're all trying to usually sell into quote unquote decision makers, which is going to be leadership for the most part, unless you're B2C. And the leadership, they are markered off of how effective of decision making do they make. So these are all the things that are bundled up whenever you're asking someone to make a change. So the change is the number one thing that you're selling, essentially, not just the price tag. So convincing someone to do something about a current pain that they have, the way that you can do that is by uncovering information that they don't currently know. A problem, you're only going to solve for something to do one of three things: to either alleviate a pain in the present, prevent a definite pain in the future that's going to happen if you don't, or avoid a potential pain that will likely happen. So in this case scenario, I didn't know if my phone would lose charge in the middle of the marathon, but it was extremely likely I thought that it would. So someone's going to make a move to do something about this based on one of two things, or a combination of the two: the likelihood of it happening and the level of impact if it does. So I'll give you an example. When I was on tour, I was talking to someone and he said, yeah, so I just bought an entire new alarm system for my house. And I said, okay, so did you have an alarm system before? He said, I did, but it wasn't working that well. I said, so out of curiosity, why did you buy an entirely, different alarm system? He's like, yeah, it was a pain in the butt. Essentially I had to spend 3 weeks getting to know it, setting it up, getting people to come in my house, But what happened, what changed for me was there was a break-in, a couple of houses down from me on the same block. And I'm like, okay, I'm still not quite seeing why you would make that big change. He's like, well, I have a newborn. So the likelihood of it happening was actually quite low, but the impact of it occurring was so high that he said, okay, I'm going to make this massive change and spend all this money doing it, because the impact of someone breaking in with a newborn is very, very, very high. So the point behind all of this is not all pains are problems, meaning not all current things that are negative am I going to do something about, and not all problems are painful quite yet. So what you can do with that information, essentially, is I would sell based on uncovering problems for my buyer. And pain's going to be a part of that. Within pain-centric selling, pain-centric selling is a patient walks into the doctor's office and the doctor starts to ask questions in this case. Where's the pain? How long has it been going on? What's the impact, to you at home? The difference between that and problem is in pain-centric selling, you stop there. So in pain-centric selling, if I ask you what hurts, and Kendra says, my shoulder, and I said, how long has it been hurting? She says, it's been hurting for a couple of weeks. And I'm like, what's the impact to you at home? You're like, well, I can't, open jars anymore. I can't, hug anyone, which is really impactful for me. And then I stop there. I have all the information on Kendra's pain, but what's the one thing that I don't know if I stop there? You can either jump in the chat or in Kendra, if you could read off some of the responses. I know all the information about the pain, how long it's been hurting, what the impact is, but what do I not know if I stop there? Yep, Matt nailed it in the Q&A. If it's bad enough to do something about it, what else do you not know? I know her shoulder's hurting. I know the impact of it. Go ahead.
People are asking, what else have you tried?
Yep.
Why I might want to fix it.
Keep going. So let's say I come into the doctor's office and I say, go ahead.
What's the root cause? How did you injure it? People also want to know what questions you should be asking to uncover these things. That's coming together.
Someone hit on it. What's the root cause? I know that Kendra hurt her shoulder. I know what the impact is, but I do not know what's causing it. So if I don't know what's causing it, then I can't solve the problem because I don't know what to change to make her problem go away. So another great example, and then I'm going to lead into the 11 types of problems you're going to see. And then we're going to finish off with some questions that you can ask. So we are going to cover those. Is I told everyone, that I ran the marathon and I crossed the line at 3:47. It was a goal-breaking time for me, certainly. And afterwards, I hadn't eaten the entire marathon. And I hadn't slept in about a month. And it was the hottest marathon in New York marathon history, 73 degrees. And it was also the most humid marathon in marathon history. And when I crossed that finish line, I went over and I, true story, passed out on the side of the track. And I don't remember much past there. I know someone carried me to a medical tent. I was in there for 3 hours. I remember people putting salt underneath my tongue. I remember people plugging my nose and making me swallow Gatorade. I remember someone asking me if I could swallow soup, and I said no and spat it out of their hand. And at one point I said, it's my stomach. My stomach is starting to cramp. And so I said, I need Tylenol. And instead of taking my word, they started poking around in my stomach because they thought it might be a different root cause than what I thought it might be. So to prepare for this presentation and to prepare for this concept in general, I went to a number of different doctor's office visits to ask them questions about how they ask questions. Pretty nerdy, I know. And so in one of those doctor's office visits, I went in and I asked the doctor, he said, okay, so why are you here today? And I was like, so I need to ask you questions about how you ask questions. And he's like, come again? And he's like, no, but what's wrong with you? And I was like, well, that is a whole can of worms that you do not want to open. I promise you. And I said, so let me ask you a question. People come into the doctor's office and essentially why do they come into the doctor's office? And he's like, typically, 98% of the time it's going to be pain-based. I'm like, okay. Out of those pain-based conditions, how often have they self-diagnosed? Have they, read something on the internet and they believe that they know the problem? And he said, thanks to WebMD, 95% of the time. I was like, okay, a little heat behind that response. How often are they wrong? How often are they incorrect in what they have self-diagnosed is the root cause of their problem? And he said, to be honest, 90. 90% of the time, they were incorrect. They are incorrect in the root cause of what's causing their problem. So what all of that means to you in the sales floor, and I get it, how buyers operate. They are bullies when they come in. They come in and they say, I need this, or I want that. And if you take them at their word and don't ask any questions, then you could be giving them the wrong solution. And statistically, 90% of the time you are, because you're operating on the information that they think they know, but they're not an expert in the field. They're not an expert in how to diagnose. So with all of these selling types, product, feature, benefit, and pain, that have brought us up to about 2020, all of those are techniques of how to convince the buyer to buy more medication. But there's an option that can actually help your buyer. But what that's going to take is you asking questions and being an expert in diagnosing their problem. What is causing the problem that they are seeing today? So a lot of sellers ask me, what is the job of sales? And I'm like, well, if it was describing our product, if our expertise was product knowledge, that doesn't make sense why we need solutions engineers. who are actually experts in our product. So our expertise, instead, from my view, should shift to our buyer, being experts on our buyer personas, knowing what they're metriced on, what are the problems they normally run into, what are the root causes of those problems. Because to that doctor's credit, I'm sitting in this medical tent and I'm telling the doctor what I need. I need Tylenol. That's what's going to alleviate what's going on right now. And they were challenging that diagnosis by poking around in a couple different spots in my stomach because they weren't positive that I was correct. They were actually banking on the information that I most likely was not incorrect. So a doctor, if you go into a doctor, they diagnose a condition and they give you a medication, and then you go home and take that medication and the medication doesn't work. What do we think about that doctor? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs down. So the reality was, after they did some more poking and prodding, they realized that the reason that I was in so much pain was because I hadn't eaten anything. And so my body temperature had dropped to 90 degrees. I was completely pale. My lips were blue. And the pain I was experiencing was because I had no nutrition in my body. I was hydrated just fine, but I had no nutrition. If they hadn't done that process and they had just given me the Tylenol, then maybe it would alleviate a little pain for me in the present. But the condition of my body temperature dropping would have been, potentially extremely impactful for me to the negative. So our opportunity within sales is to uncover the problems that our buyer is trying to solve. What are the root causes? What are the impacts? And what are all the things that they don't know in the situation? So 87% of Gartner put out a stat that 87% of buyers don't want a seller involved, whether that's for an enterprise solution, software solution, or whether that's to buy a stick of gum. And if I had to guess why, it's because in their experience, when they have dealt with sellers in the past, they have never ever learned something from the seller about themselves that they didn't know. There's only one thing that they don't know that they believe the seller does know. And so they always come in and they ask for this piece of information. So let's see if anyone can guess it. If you could either go into the chat or if you want to do me a solid and go into the Q&A. What's the one piece of information that we don't know that we believe sellers do know that we ask for whenever we're buying something? Daniel and James already nailed it.
Everybody's saying price.
Price. And our buyers are mad. And the reason they're mad is because in their experience, they do want someone who tells them things about them that they don't know because they know they're not the expert. But in their experience, they never ever find out something that they didn't know about them. So the only piece of information they're after that they think you have is price. So I get it. Buyers today, in some regards, we're a buyer and we are a seller. Some situations we're a buyer and we're a seller. It's not that we're bad people as a buyer. It's that we're convinced based on our experience that the seller doesn't know anything that we don't know. So I'm going to go into a couple of different types of problems here, and then we're going to transition into one last concept, and we'll close out. But essentially, I would be after, if I were you, and this is a painful process that I've had to go through, I would think in my head, out of all the buyers that I know, or I have, out of all the buyer personas that I have, sales ops, sales enablement, SDR leaders, and sales leaders, do I know what they're metriced on? That's square one. If I'm selling to a CTO, a CIO, a CFO, do I know what number they're metriced on to drive more or less of? So an example of this is oftentimes I've talked to sales trainers and they're like, sales enablement's really hard to sell into. So I start asking questions about why. they're like, yeah. So I always come in and I ask them questions around ASP, around conversion, around, open rates and reply rates. And I already understand the problem. I'm like, well, that's great. But a sales leader is going to be metriced on quota attainment. So ASP and conversion matters to them. An SDR leader is going to be measured on booked meetings. So open rates and reply rates matter to them. But a sales enablement leader is going to be measured on time to first deal, time to full ramp, product adoption, training adoption. So because their metric shifts, so do the problems that they incur because they're trying to achieve a completely different metric. So the square one of being able to problem-centric sell is to know your buyer. Know that what they're metriced on, what they're hired and fired, promoted and demoted to drive. What number is that? So I can orient myself in the conversation around what problems are they running into that are preventing them from achieving a goal or hitting that metric. But that's going to be square one. So for time's sake, I know we're already at 11:36. There are 11 different types of problems. I'm not going to cover them, but they'll be in the deck. But just for time's sake here, but the 11 different types of problems you're going to see is a symptom base. This is the most common. They're experiencing a pain and they want you to alleviate it. A sign based. This is going to be a problem that you uncover as the expert that they have, but they don't know that they have this problem. So a great example is when you do physicals for doctors, or the doctors do physicals. They're testing for non-pain-based signs that a problem exists. The problem with these problems is they're the most aggressive problems because people don't know that they have them. This is where you're going to win the most credibility with buyers, is asking them questions to understand if they have a problem that they don't know about. Threat-based problems, they're trying to avoid a threat that's going to happen in the future. A goal-based problem, where they're trying to achieve a goal or a metric, it's not painful yet. It's painful if they get the answer of how to solve for it wrong. I know I'm going super fast. You'll get the deck afterwards, but I have to be on time here. A future metric-based problem, they're trying to achieve a metric in the future, so they don't have pain today, but they're trying to solve for a pain that will happen tomorrow if they don't solve for it today. So a great example is a team is hitting quota. They have a quota of 10 meetings. They're at 12 meetings currently, but they have a new metric that's going to come into place of 20 meetings per month in Q1. So they're okay today, but if they hit 12 meetings in Q1, then they're going to have a problem starting in Q1. A future event-based problem, a prescription-based problem, that is essentially they've tried to solve for the problem with a former prescription. It didn't work. So they're trying to solve for it again. They're trying to find a real solution. The difference with this type of problem is usually they're more fired up and they're next on the line more because they already tried to solve for it, spent budget, spent money, spent internal capital, but they didn't solve for it with the first prescription. A lateral-based problem. This is they solved their current problem that they were looking to solve, but it created a new one. Great example of this is I solved my charge problem on my phone, but in the last 30 minutes of the marathon, the screen shifts really regularly on the iPhone 14. And it did so much in the last stage of the marathon that I accidentally entered in my passcode apparently 15 times wrong. So it locked me out of my phone for an hour. So not only was I stranded in a medical tent, I couldn't call my dad and let him know where I was. This is a lateral-based problem. Taylor Swift was still playing in my ears, but I had a whole new problem that I couldn't use the phone to call anyone. So this is a lateral-based problem. An amelioration-based problem, you're hitting your current metrics, but you just want to make things better. An opportunity-based problem, this is not a painful problem. You're trying to seize a positive opportunity that you see in the future. And then a success-based problem. You're successful against your current metrics, but your success has created a new problem. An example is I had a company that I was working with, and they said, we're way past our metric, but our inbound volume is so high, we can't take care of it. So we need a process to take care of it faster. I know, great, nice problem, right? Point being, there are 11 problems that you can solve for, but the point of this whole first part of the presentation is this: not all pains are problems, and not all problems are painful yet. So to solve for problems with your buyer, and to be an expert, and to be a credible resource, and to be an asset, and to be on your buyer's side, and to help your buyer, sometimes helping them by uncovering that their self-diagnosis is incorrect, you have to ask questions. And the goal of the questions can't be to make them feel heard, make them feel understood, make them feel like they can trust you, make them feel anything. The goal of the questions is to diagnose. That is the problem in the sales industry for thousands of years, is that we're all, in my experience, piling on objection handling, sessions to understand how can I handle this objection in a way that makes my buyer feel a certain way. But the goal of a seller is to diagnose what's going on with them and to solve that problem for them. So to do this and to go into the questions, essentially, I'm going to lead with another story. Again, I know that this deck is really long. You're going to get the deck afterwards. I'm going to try and cover the rough highlights. So I told you that I was running the marathon, but I didn't tell you why. So the punchline behind why is my mom is a wonderful runner. Ran for 30 years. Wonderful as in she qualified and ran the Boston Marathon in her 60s. Nice, pretty high bar. She ran the Dallas White Rock Marathon, and she came in third in her age group. Place 1 and 2 were actual Olympians. She still has a six-pack after 3 kids in her 60s. She would murder me for me saying any of this, by the way. Mows the lawn in Texas heat in her flip-flops in her 60s. I'm like, all right, Chuck Norris, so she was an amazing runner. It was who she was. Until one day, she went out for a run, and there was ice on the ground. And she slipped when she was running. She calls me. She's like, so I slipped on the ice, and I'm having a little pain. She said, what should I do? I said, dummy, go into the doctor. See what's going on. Ask for an MRI. So she goes into the doctor, and essentially the doctor says, doesn't ask many questions, and says, okay, I know what's going on with you. You don't need an MRI. Just do these physical therapy exercises. So she says, okay, I'll go ahead. You're the doctor, you're the expert. So I'll go home and I'll do these exercises. So she does these exercises, and she calls me after a week and she says, I'm experiencing, oddly enough, more pain. What should I do? And I said, you go back into that douchebag doctor and you tell him, I said, use those words finitely, that you're experiencing more pain and that you think you need an MRI. You think there's something wrong. She says, okay. So she goes into the doctor and she says, hey, I'm experiencing more pain. He doesn't ask any questions. And he says, no, this is just part of the process. It'll get worse before it gets better. So keep doing these exercises. So she says, all right, you're the doctor. So she goes home and does the exercises for 3 more weeks like he asks. And she calls me after 3 weeks. She's like, I'm in immense pain. What should I do? I said, go back into the doctor. So she goes into the doctor and she says, I'm in immense crippling pain in my knee. I need an MRI. Please give me an MRI. So he concedes and he says, okay, I'll give you an MRI. And he knew that she had pain. But what he missed, because he didn't do the MRI, was that she had a small tear in her knee. And because of the exercises that would have made someone else's knee feel better, because she did those for 4 weeks in total, she can never run again in her life. She'll never run again. It was who she was. And one person's solution made her knee so bad that now she can only walk. So the reason I tell you that story, even though it's hard for me to say, is we have the opportunity in sales to impact someone drastically for the better or for the worse. And that's based on not how you make them feel, but do you uncover the true problem that's happening to them? That's the opportunity that we have in front of us. And I don't think that that doctor was malevolent. I don't think he woke up that day thinking, I really want to screw someone's world up for the rest of their life. I think, if I was candid, that he woke up on some days just like me, walking into the room with good intent. But if you don't ask the right questions, and if the goal isn't in selling to uncover those root causes, then you can miss something that is the difference between someone excelling in that position, crushing it, and moving, like getting promoted, or getting fired, not because the solution was bad, because the solution was bad for them, because that wasn't the problem that they had. So there's a number of different questions that you can go into to uncover these. I'm going to cover 2 pieces and a couple of examples of the questions, and then we can close out. But I'm after, in that sales room, only 2 things. How do I uncover the problems that they want to solve that they do know about? Uncover what they've self-diagnosed, what they've self-prognosed as the impact. Uncovering if all of that information is truly the correct self-diagnosis. And how do I uncover all of the things and all of the problems that they don't know about? That's where you're going to win the credibility and the rapport. So the difference between the second concept is the difference between a symptom and a sign medically is a symptom is pain-based, it's subjective in nature, and it has to be noticed by the patient originally. So most people are going to come in for symptom-based conditions. They're in pain, their nose is running, their eyes are watering, their stomach hurts, so they're going to come in. A sign, and this is what I alluded to earlier, is a piece of evidence that a deeper condition exists that is objective in nature, is not pain-based, and that the doctor notices first. So the difference is in who notices it. Symptom is always going to be the patient. Sign is always going to be the doctor. So the reality that this presents is statistics will show you that 3 to 4% of people will actually come in for their yearly physical. I'm not one of them. That's exposing. And if I had to guess why, it's because I'm not in any pain. So I don't think there's anything wrong. So this is where you can win credibility with your prospect, is by uncovering things about them that they didn't know about that are currently hurting them. So someone's only going to find you as a credible resource if you tell them, if you show them, if you uncover things about them that they didn't know. If they already knew about it, then they're at best going to see it as manipulative, because it is. So this is where we can win all of the rapport with our prospects. So to do this, again, there's a number of different slides in here. To do this, I would look at all these slides. Oh my God, Becc, get a life. There's 13 types of questions that you can ask, but the goal is to uncover the problems they do know about and the problems they don't know about. So I'm going to go into the 4 types of questions that I don't see people asking typically in the sales room, and then I'll open it up to a brief Q&A. So a problem question is the first example of a question that I don't see people asking very often. There are 3 types of problem questions. This is a question that helps you uncover what problem they're trying to solve, makes them talk about a problem that they already know about, or best case scenario, where you'll win the most rapport, helps them realize that they have a problem that they didn't know that they had beforehand. So I see a lot of people talking about value on LinkedIn. Value, 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 value. How do I add value? And the reality is you can only add value through questions in 2 ways. They know something after your question that they didn't know beforehand, or they're considering something in a different way than they were beforehand. So this 3rd type of question, problem question, that they realize that they have a problem while they're answering your question, is the golden keys to the kingdom in terms of problem questions, but they're insatiably hard to ask. That's why Inception is a 3-hour-long movie, and we needed the brilliance of Leonardo DiCaprio, ladies, am I right? To get us through. It's because it's insatiably hard to get someone to realize something about themselves. So a great example of this is a lot of times I'll ask people, I'm like, so correct me if I'm wrong, looks like you have 70 people on your team. Who's your top performer? They'll say, Kendra. I'm like, got it. So what's Kendra saying differently on cold calls that's driving all of that conversion of people taking meetings? And they'll start to answer me. They'll say, Kendra knows a lot about our buyer, and she's been around for a long time, and she just really seems to get it. And while they're answering me, they're realizing one thing. Kendra, I'm gonna make you come off mute. What do you think they're realizing while they're answering me?
I think they realize that they don't know.
Yep, bingo. And if they did know, what could they do with that information?
Yeah, right. They would teach it to the rest of the team, right?
They turn everyone else into Kendra. So this type of question helps them realize something that they didn't know before the question. So this is the most valuable type of problem question. The second question that I don't see people asking very often is a sign-based question. Again, this is to help you uncover that the answer tells you as the expert that there's a problem, but they don't know that means that they have a problem. A great example of this is I'll ask people oftentimes, I'll say, hey, so tell me about your inbound process. And they'll say, so we round robin our leads, our inbound leads. And I'm thinking in my head, well, there goes 50% of their leads. And then they'll say, I'll be like, okay, so let's say that I come in inbound on a Friday night at 7. What happens then? They say, oh, well, we send them a notification letting them know that we're off hours and that we'll get back to them on Monday. And I'll say, and I'll think in my head, oh, there goes another 25% of their leads. And then I'll ask them the question of like, okay, so whenever the SDR does reach out and does get a hold of the person, what is the goal of that conversation? We'll say, hey, well, it's to ask them questions to better gear for their demo. And I'm like what type of questions? And they're like, do they have budget? And are they the decision maker? And is there a need? And I'm like, are they bank questions? And they'll say, yeah. On a side note, how would uncovering someone's budget help you better gear for their demo? Or that they're a decision maker. I digress. But when they say it's bank questions, I'm like, oh, there goes 15% more of their leads. I know the reality is that on average, the highest that I've seen of people who request a demo to actually get a first discovery call, the highest I've seen in looking at thousands of programs is 22.5%. The lowest I've seen is 4. The average is around 9 or 10. That means that, let's say 35% of them are truly unqualified. That means that best case scenario that I've seen, you're churning 45% of your leads who want to talk to you, who want to see your product based on process. I know when that answer means they likely have a problem, but they don't know that answer means they have a problem. They say it really proudly. Well, we round robin our leads because we want to, take high quality care of them. And they say it in a proud way. They don't know that that's going to cause them to lose 50% of their leads, but I do as a doctor. So that's a sign-based question. So actually, where are we at on time? We're at 55. Why don't we go into, I covered a lot. I'm going to pause. Why don't we go into a couple of questions, then we can close out for the day, now that I've officially dumped too much data on everyone.
This was great. People are obviously really excited to get their hands on this deck. Just because you just touched on this, I will pull Sarah's question from the Q&A. Why the 50% comment on round robin? Why do you lose 50% of your leads if you do it that way?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So the best thing that I can point you to, if you go to Chili Piper, and you can see one or two resources. If you go to the Gong case study with Chili Piper, that's when I was at Gong. That's how I drove 70% more conversion through process. But the punchline is, I would highly recommend, if you're wondering, or you do go and look back and you are converting, just to a first conversation, anything less than 70% of your leads, I would highly recommend, going and talking to Chili Piper about what you can do. But the punchline is, we're in a now society, and if a decision maker's on the line and they're coming, they don't want to, people don't like talking to salespeople. So the pain is so high at the point that they do, that when they're inbounding, if you don't make it easy on them, they'll churn. If you ask them too many questions, if it takes too much time. So the statistic is, after 5 minutes, you see dramatic drop off in people that will actually take a first discussion because it's just too difficult to get a hold of you. But that's it, without going into another hour long. I can answer it.
Yeah. Maybe just one more. This is also from Sarah. What should we be asking instead of BANT as SDRs?
Yeah. So I think generally speaking, BANT aside, BANT was developed by IBM as a framework when they had way too much business. And they were trying to qualify people out. They had 2 underwater bottles and they had 3,000 people in the desert. And so they were trying to qualify people out of, like, do you have money in hand and are you the decision maker? Just to quickly service, with the limited resources that they had. And we're still using it today. So the thing that I'm after in a first discovery call, like, essentially, I'm after uncovering what's the problem they're trying to solve. What are the things that they don't know about? So I wouldn't suggest qualifying out. Now, from an org perspective, if you want to do it on overt indicator of, like, title size or level of title or discipline of title, or the org of the company, or like an integration stack, if you need that, then I would ask, again, if you can either go to Chili Piper, if you go to flipthescript.co and click on Free Sales Training Hub, Becc Stack, Chili Piper. There's 5 different episodes where I go into the deep process, but essentially BANT was created as a way to qualify people out, not to uncover the problem that they have, not to sell more, to actually sell less and sell more quickly.
That is really insightful. We've got just like 2 minutes left, I think. Let's wrap it all up. So I've dropped in the chat Beck's LinkedIn. So go ahead and follow me there. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Beck,
looks like we got a couple more questions. Liz and Dan.
Yeah.
Some of those are.
Do you want to hit it?
Yes.
Yeah, go for it.
So how do you find the metrics that your prospects would have for promotion, demotion? Liz, that's a great question. So this is I don't mean this to be placating at all. The great resource, I just go to Google and I put in your buyer and say, hey, CTO metrics, CTO KPIs, CIO metrics, CIO KPIs. So I can tell you for a sales leader, it's going to be quota attainment. For an SDR, it's usually going to be booked meetings, influence pipeline, or quote unquote qualified meetings, usually according to Becc criteria. For sales enablement, it's going to be time to first deal, product adoption, tech adoption, training adoption. For a marketer, it's usually going to be MQL, or it's going to be influence pipeline. But if you just go to Google and just type in their metrics to know what their win is, what their point is, because they're going to evaluate everything according to that win, is the quickest way. So I did this for 6 different buyer personas live on the line with someone, and it took, I think, 8 minutes in total to come up with all their metric. But that's the biggest resource bet. You can even Google what are the problems that CTOs are running into, and you'll get a plethora of different articles, usually, and really insightful information.
We've got more questions coming in about where are we getting this deck from? Becc, that's coming from you or from us? One of them.
So I will send that over to Kendra if that's okay. I'll send you over this deck. There's cool. A lot that I'm covering in this. I'll be putting the assets on my site pretty soon. But if you want to see more topics like this, if you go to flipthescript.co and click on free sales training hub, I have 204 hours of recorded content in there, all with decks, all for free. All you have to put in is your email, and I go into all types of topics: BANT, conversion, discovery, problem-centric, pain-centric, objection handling, just ego state, psychology, everything, cold email templates, everything that you can think of when it comes to sales, or at least that I could think of. But this deck I'll send over to Kendra.
Awesome. So that'll be coming from us as well as this recording, so you can watch it back as many times as you like. We are over, so I think we should stop.
Okay.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Becc, so much. I know you can't see the chat, but it is full of praise. People love this.
Now I see it.
Yeah, you see it. Yeah. Look at all those emojis. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. Join us again. It was a real pleasure, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.